Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Tuesday, June 9th. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Some believe his death will change the world. And today, hundreds gathered to say farewell to George Floyd, the man whose death sparked a worldwide movement. Camila Bernal has more on the emotional funeral and how lawmakers are debating what comes next.
I'm going to miss my brother a whole lot.
At a time of reflection, a call for action.
America, it is time for a change. Even if it shall begin with more protests, no justice, no peace.
Friends and family members laid George Floyd to rest Tuesday afternoon in Houston. The 46-year-old was killed more than 2 weeks ago, igniting nationwide outrage over police brutality.
We speak and we decree and we declaim that right now, Lord God, there shall be justice.
At the funeral, hope for a silver lining amidst the tragedy.
George Floyd changed the world, and we're going to make the world know that he made a difference.
Around the country, a push for sweeping police reform measures. Some, including the Minneapolis City Council, believe defunding the police and remodeling the force while reallocating funds to other areas is the answer.
We need to make deeper change than we have in the past.
Both President Trump and his Democratic opponent, Joe Biden, have spoken out against defunding the police. Congresswoman Karen Bass, who helped craft a sweeping Democratic proposal for police reform, agrees.
I don't think that that's the appropriate thing to do.
But those who have been protesting for days want change. Whether Floyd's death can bridge the gap between both sides will become apparent soon enough. Camila Bernal, KPBS News.
San Diego City Council members approved a budget late last night after a nearly 12-hour hearing. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says the focus of the meeting was funding for the police department.
The first 10 hours of the meeting were taken up by public testimony.
We cannot keep funding our police to this extent. I am calling to urge you that we defund the police. Reject Mayor Faulconer's proposal to increase the police budget.
I am urging the council not to give the STPD any more money. They have too much money as it is.
Caller after caller urged the council to cut funding from SDPD and redirect it to social and economic justice programs. This comes as protests over police brutality and racism continue in the wake of the George Floyd killing in Minneapolis. In the end, though, the council made no big changes to the mayor's proposed police budget of more than $566 million, a 5% increase compared to the current fiscal year. Councilmember Monica Montgomery, who ran on a platform of better police accountability, said efforts to reform policing will continue.
We have been poring over this budget and trying to do the best that we possibly can, which with as much support as we possibly have, to make a better city and take this opportunity during this time.
Councilmember Chris Ward cast the only no vote, saying he was disappointed his renter relief fund for low-income tenants impacted by the coronavirus pandemic got only a fraction of what he had hoped for. And he said policing does need deeper reform now.
I would like to have seen a reallocation of resources from police towards program policies and initiatives that support this work, because we need to be investing more in our people, proactive measures, and less in reactive measures.
After the budget vote, a group of about 50 protesters showed up outside Mayor Kevin Faulconer's home in Point Loma and protested his budget, loudly but peacefully. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
As we know, the death of George Floyd sparked outrage, even rioting and looting like we saw in La Mesa. Today, leaders there unveiled a timeline of events, hoping to better understand and learn from what happened. Here's KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman.
We will continue to improve and ensure to the best of our ability that something of this nature does not happen again.
Today, La Mesa city officials released their recap of what led up to violent demonstrations and looting on May 30th.
Where is humanity?
People were out protesting all day over the death of George Floyd and a controversial arrest of a black man just days earlier by La Mesa police. LMPD says an unlawful assembly was declared, but it's unclear if some protesters heard that. When officers reported that rocks started to be thrown at them, that's when they say deputies deployed tear gas. Beanbag rounds were also used, but some were injured in the chaos, including a 59-year-old woman who was hit in the face. The La Mesa police chief was asked today if he's comfortable with his department's response to protesters.
It's always very complicated, without a doubt. I mean, truly. And all of the use of force incidents are being documented and reviewed.
Later in the night, multiple businesses were looted and 2 banks were burnt to the ground.
We'll never move past this. This will always be a benchmark, and this will be the area from where we go from.
La Mesa's mayor says a lot of change is needed and it's time to be unconventional.
What I've been telling people is nothing's off the table.
We asked him if that meant reforming the police department or cutting its funding.
What I mean by nothing's off the table, I think every department is going to look at things differently. And whatever's going to move us to a part of an area of equality and trust, it's going to take a long time, but I think you have to be unconventional and you have to look at everything.
I definitely want the mayor to be able to reach out to people or have a team that's set up to reach out to the community so that way, you know, their voices from the community can be heard.
Casey Short organized the Saturday La Mesa protest. He says he left before looting and destruction broke out, and he's just hoping that officials are being honest when they say it's time for change.
I can't breathe. If there's no type of communication between the people that have the power to make the change and the people that want the change, then, you know, nothing's going to get solved with all these protests.
A full report on the La Mesa demonstrations and how it was handled by police is still months away, but the LMPD chief is inviting protesters to talk. LMPD says a third-party investigation into that arrest near the Grossmont trolley station is underway. Also, the department is looking into why that woman was shot in the face with a beanbag round. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
The woman shot in the head, with a beanbag round during the La Mesa protest is now out of the hospital. And at one time, Leslie Furcron had been placed in a medically induced coma from her injuries. She and her attorney are set to speak to the media tomorrow at La Mesa City Hall. California lawmakers are proposing reforms after people were injured while protesting police brutality in the recent weeks. One of them is a woman in Sacramento who was hit in the eye by a projectile, likely causing blindness.
I was walking away, I was away from the crowd, and I turned around to where my brother was at, and when I turned around, I got hit. It does not feel like rubber. It felt like somebody shot me with a cannon.
San Diego Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez is co-authoring AB 66, which would ensure a standard use of force for rubber bullets, also called kinetic impact projectiles.
What we found was there is no standard use for these projectiles and the use of those by the police.
Governor Gavin Newsom recently demanded an end to the carotid control hold. Assemblyman Todd Gloria is co-authoring legislation to ban its use across the state. And last week, law enforcement agencies in San Diego County announced they would stop using the restraint immediately. Another grim milestone reached today for the coronavirus in San Diego County, with 5 additional deaths reported. 301 people have now died from the virus. Health officials also announced 110 new cases. The news comes as San Diego opened piers, boardwalks, and beach parking lots. KPBS reporter John Carroll has the latest.
The warmest day so far of 2020, a perfect day to hit the beach or to enjoy the now reopened pier at Ocean Beach. And that's just what thousands of people did on this Tuesday.
I just have felt housebound so long, I can't wait to get out. It was wonderful today.
Sue Harris, along with her friend and her son, were enjoying the now officially open boardwalk at Mission Beach. She had her mask with her, but she wasn't wearing it.
Out in the fresh air, I just can't believe anything could live through this ocean water.
Joanne Garcia-Polo does not think the threat posed by COVID-19 is overblown. She and her friend were wearing their masks. But like Sue Harris, they were enjoying the day too.
To be honest, tomorrow my sister-in-law and I are going to come out
and do bike ride along the bay that I miss so much. I used to come out on a weekly basis, and looking forward to that a lot.
But this day is about more than the ability to enjoy sand, surf, boardwalk, and the ability to park all at once. It's also a very good day for local business. Kojak's owner Mike Sultan was able to keep his business, even though he says he felt like he was drowning over the last several weeks. Now he's hopeful.
I think we can make it finally, with this opening. A lot of stuff for the parking lot, the boardwalk, everything.
But the EMS medical director for San Diego Fire and Rescue says everyone should remember the virus is still here and it's still spreading.
But we know that viruses often come in waves. And the fact that we're reopening right now doesn't necessarily mean that everything's all better.
On Friday, we'll take another big step in the reopening process with gyms, hotels, bars and wineries, museums, galleries, the zoo, and aquariums, among other places. John Carroll, KPBS News.
Today is the last day of school for the San Diego Unified School District. It comes while there is still uncertainty surrounding what will happen this fall. Yesterday, the California Department of Education released recommendations for safe reopening. They include face coverings, symptom screenings, staggered scheduling, and a mix of in-person and distance learning. Each district will be responsible for how to reopen its schools. Are you feeling those Santa Anas today? It sure feels like summer as the county experiences a heat wave for a few days. Mark Mancuso has your forecast.
Yes, look at our weather highlights, and our unseasonably stretch of warm weather continues right into tomorrow. Tomorrow not as hot as today, but still well above average. Then we'll start to see that onshore flow starting to return here. We'll feel a little bit of cooling near the coast, and then for the end of the week, more significant cooling as a trough slides down across the area. Overnight tonight, still looking at mostly clear skies, and we'll be seeing temperatures dropping down to 54 at Oceanside, San Diego 64, Borrego Springs at 70, and El Cajon at 63. Now, as we take a look at the weather on Wednesday, not as hot, but still very warm along the coast, and in the interior sections, it's sizzling as temperatures will be soaring again. Looking at our forecast highs for tomorrow, Borrego Springs 106, Campos at 91, 92 Escondido, Ramona 93, El Cajon 96. Temperatures in San Diego still in the low 80s and low 80s in Oceanside. Checking on Thursday, a little relief coming into the coast, but still blazing heat in the desert areas. Checking on the upper air system, you see a little bit of a trough there coming down Friday and continuing into the weekend in a much weaker form on Sunday. But nonetheless, there's some cooling coming. So Wednesday, still very warm. And then we'll see temperatures step down a little bit. Notice the cooling coming in Friday, and we'll see more in the way of morning low clouds with that marine layer deepening. Inland section still pretty hot into Thursday, and then starting to drop off temperature-wise Friday and Saturday. In the mountains, we see the cooling coming in Friday into Saturday, and in the deserts, it's sizzling here, but even here, temperatures start to drop off during the weekend. For KPBS News, I am meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
The heat across Southern California has firefighters on high alert. Crews have been battling a fire near the border. It burned about 2 acres on the California side, approximately 1 mile east of the Otay port of entry. While firefighters stopped its spread and are mopping up, CAL FIRE is watching the situation closely because of a number of fires burning in Mexico. No homes or other buildings are threatened north of the border. During the coronavirus pandemic, refugees from Iraq and Syria living in El Cajon have had a tough time escaping domestic violence. iNews Source reporter Roxana Popescu spoke with experts to find out why.
Advocates say the COVID-19 pandemic has made things harder for Iraqi and Syrian refugees who are victims of domestic violence. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Dilapaz Ahmed's phone has been ringing more than usual. In March, April, and May, her El Cajon nonprofit, Licensed to Freedom, had 45 new cases. One woman Ahmed worked with hesitated to get a restraining order. Another was afraid her husband would send her back to Iraq. Domestic violence is up across East County. Law enforcement agencies report an increase in incidents in March and April. Claudia Grosso with the San Diego District Attorney's Office says calls to hotlines in San Diego County have become more dire.
In talking to them, to our hotline providers, they're saying that they're not necessarily getting an uptick in calls, but the calls that they are getting are more urgent. Basically, I need to get out now type of calls.
Advocates say victims of domestic violence who are refugees face unique challenges. They are less likely to know how the legal system works, they're more likely to be isolated, and they don't always know their rights and options. For KPBS, I'm iNews Source reporter Roxana Popescu.
And iNews Source is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. State lawmakers want answers from the nursing home industry over its handling of the coronavirus pandemic. As KPBS reporter Amita Sharma tells us, roughly half the state's COVID-19 deaths happened in senior care facilities.
Assemblyman Jim Wood told Craig Cornett, who heads the California Association of Health Facilities, he was frustrated and concerned. He said some of the first U.S. outbreaks of COVID-19 were in long-term care facilities in Washington state. Wood, a Santa Rosa Democrat, repeated the nursing home industry's stance that it lacked enough personal protective equipment and testing to prevent the virus's spread. But he sounded skeptical.
When did you begin to try to acquire your own PPE? And I point this out because the vast majority of your skilled nursing facilities are for profit, and they're making a lot of money.
Cornett said nursing homes had a tough time purchasing PPE because of low supplies. He added that the industry was plagued by ever-shifting guidance from public health officials.
And we did not know initially that asymptomatic people could be transferred into skilled nursing facilities and be spreading the disease without any symptoms showing at all.
But those officials at the hearing said information about asymptomatic spread was made public in early March. Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
While the rest of the country begins to open up, the Navy continues to update its own response to the coronavirus with policies that lean heavily on isolation. The Navy has tried to learn from a recent outbreak aboard the USS Roosevelt. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh has been following the story.
On April 23rd, a sailor from the USS Kidd was diagnosed with COVID-19, the second outbreak aboard a Navy ship. Commander Michael Kaplan was at the Navy Medical Center in Jacksonville, Florida. His team was flown to El Salvador, where the Navy destroyer was anchored off the coast.
We were there within hours of that positive test results.
By the time they arrived, the ship's medical team had isolated 20 to 30 sailors who were showing symptoms.
It was actually kind of somewhat of a surreal situation. We didn't really have much time to think about what we were getting into, which is probably a good thing. Not too many people would probably want to run into a burning building, and that's probably the best analogy.
And it's not an overstatement. The Navy has had the most cases of any of the services. Roughly half of its more than 2,000 cases have come from outbreaks aboard two ships, the carrier USS Roosevelt and a month later on board the USS Kidd. One of the lessons learned from the Roosevelt, the Navy moved quickly to track down everyone who was sick on board the Kidd. Again, Navy Dr. Michael Kaplan.
That was exactly our plan, is to try to test 100% of the crew as quickly as possible. So we worked 24/7, round the clock, from the moment we got there to the time we left. And it took us about 3.5 days to get everybody on board, over 300 people tested.
The Pentagon is now loosening coronavirus restrictions, but the Navy remains particularly vulnerable to an outbreak. Keeping the virus away from sailors is a constant challenge. The new Navy buzz phrase is creating the bubble. They isolate sailors in small groups. In May, the Navy SEALs used the bubble to justify reopening portions of its notoriously grueling basic training, including Hell Week. In this footage of SEAL training, cadets are shown being pushed to the brink of collapse. Commodore Bart Randall says the Navy can keep sailors crammed together during training because the cadets are isolated from other classes and from the rest of the base.
Those guys, that bubble is solid. We are increasing all the social distancing in our classrooms, in the chow hall. There's some things that we're not going to change these standards, though. We're not changing the quality of training.
The Navy is still ramping up testing. It's been a struggle. The Naval Health Research Center was granted authority to test by the CDC on February 12th. But it took another 2 weeks before hospitals figured out a process for getting samples to the lab, says Dr. Chris Myers.
The case definition in the beginning was very limiting, right? So you had to have specific travel to Wuhan, China, and other limitations, or at least contact with someone that met the COVID definition. So meeting that narrow case definition may have been problematic in the beginning.
With each month, the tests themselves are getting faster. The tests used on the kids showed results within 15 minutes, says Dr. Kaplan, who responded to the initial outbreak. Testing is still the only way to find out if people have the virus but who don't show symptoms. That includes roughly half of the some 90 cases found on board the kid.
A ship is a tough place to have an outbreak. But again, we actually were able to implement a number of different steps to try to mitigate the spread that hopefully other ships in the future were going to make it part of their standard operating procedures, such as, routine cleaning, increasing the frequency that we do cleaning of common areas.
The Navy is also keeping vessels at sea to prevent the crews from coming into contact with the virus. While the carrier USS Nimitz was in San Diego, sailors were not allowed off the ship. The entire crew were sequestered in Washington state for nearly a month prior. The ship was just deployed, but all ports of call are canceled. Even pilots that fly in to deliver supplies will have to be isolated for 2 weeks to preserve the Navy's new bubble. For KPBS News, I'm Steve Walsh.
Now, if you're in need of some escapist entertainment, then KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando suggests the FX network's What We Do in the Shadows. The season 2 finale is tomorrow night, and she talked to actor Matt Berry about working on the show.
What We Do in the Shadows uses a mockumentary style to show what life might be like for a vampire living in today's society.
After all that nonsense on Staten Island, I cut loose to Pennsylvania because it sounded like Transylvania. We all know that sounds cool.
The most fun is, when you play somebody who has no sense of humor and has no sense of themselves in that way and doesn't really care, what other people think. But the way that he was written was he sounded like he was quite sort of keen on the sound of his own voice.
Matt Berry plays Laszlo, a centuries-old British vampire who's a bit full of himself, as he reveals in this scene with his own ghost.
You remember the night you officially died, I presume? No, I remember it well. My lovely Naja came in through the window, took my life, thus making me the vampire you see before you now. A damn handsome one at that, I might say.
He's no different than he was the day before he was a vampire. So, he's still the same conceited idiot, that he always was.
Berry has a long career in British sitcoms as an actor, writer, and composer. And What We Do in the Shadows taps into his creativity because it allows for everyone on the set to improvise freely off the script.
No one is particularly precious about the script. Unless there's a line that is going to be kind of relevant for a visual joke or something, a couple of scenes sort of later on, then you have to make sure that you get that right. But other than that, it's very, very loose.
Laszlo's vampire wife, Nadia, is played by Natasha Demetrio.
My Laszlo has always been quite musical.
I like working with Natasha. That's my, one of my main highlights. That's great because we got almost identical sense of humor. And that really helps.
For she is an exquisite lyricist.
Guilty, Your Honor. Send me down.
See?
That's why I love this one. Shall we do it?
What ever happened to sweet Daisy Lou?
Her hoop skirt was a poop skirt when she couldn't find the loo.
It's just made so much easier for me being in such an amazing set, everybody kind of concentrating as hard as they can, because that really brings out everyone to, sort of fizz off each other and do what you need to do. If there's that amount of attention to detail that's gone into everything that you look at around you, then you have to match that. I think you have to be as good as all this. So it does, it kind of makes you raise your game, which is always worth doing.
The season 2 finale of What We Do in the Shadows drops on FX tomorrow night, and the show has been renewed for a 3rd season. If you haven't yet sunk your teeth into the show, I urge you to give it a try. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, a final farewell. George Floyd is laid to rest as calls for change ring across the nation. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
An update now on our top stories. Today, George Floyd, the man whose death sparked nationwide protests to end police violence, was laid to rest. Hundreds gathered for Floyd's funeral in Houston. The 46-year-old was killed by a Minneapolis police officer more than 2 weeks ago. His friends and family say he changed the world. San Diego City Council members approved a city budget late last night. The first 10 hours of the hearing was public testimony, most urging the council to cut funding from the San Diego Police Department and redirect it to social programs. About 50 people protested the budget outside Mayor Kevin Faulconer's home. Today, San Diego opened all of its piers and boardwalks. Also, parking lots at the beach are now all open. On Friday, we'll take another big step in the reopening process with gyms, hotels, bars, wineries, and museums. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.